Morning, Charlie. Lovely intro.
Yes, we're really excited to have you. So just to start, could you give us a little bit of background? What was your career journey? How did you end up doing what you do now? Just so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Sure. I am Sonnaz Nooranvary, and I am currently working for myself for a small business in Dorset. And this is not the job I thought I would have, but if it's helpful to share that from a very young age, I was very creative, and I was always interested in drawing and painting and colouring. But we had a very kind of strict upbringing and were kind of discouraged from being creative. And so it was not something that I ever really thought that I would pursue. And then as I got older, so sort of 10 to sort of the age of 12, I found myself sort of drawing and being creative and actually interested in my mum's sewing machine as well. And going into school, I really struggled with the academic side of things and reading and writing, quite dyslexic, which wasn't really picked up then. And so I thought that I would pursue the academic route because that was what was deemed kind of the better route over something creative. But having applied for law and sociology and psychology courses and I was accepted, I then changed my mind and attended the sixth form with the art subjects and textiles. But
it seems that I think she's just lost connection. Right in the middle of answering a sentence. So while we wait for her to come back on, we'll move on to a different speaker. And then when she comes back, we'll pick back up with her. So while we wait for her, let's listen from Richard. Richard is, again, really happy to have him joining us today. He is a master goldsmith. So we're going to bring him on and hear a little bit about his career journey and how he ended up with such a grand title. So everybody, please welcome Richard.
Very good morning, everyone. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for having us. So yeah, my name is Richard Salmon. I am a master goldsmith. I started my journey in the trade with a lifelong passion as a child for geology, like collecting rocks and minerals, and a love for metalwork. And that was developed very early on, even before I was about 10 years of age. So by the time I'd come to secondary school at the age of 12, I'd already had quite a clear idea as to what I wanted to do, loving gemstones and loving metalwork. So I struggled a little bit through secondary school. I wasn't very academic at all. Much like Sonnaz, the previous speaker, I was only really in touch with my creative side. That took me on to, at the age of 16, going to an art college in East London, where I studied jewellery making, which went on to an apprenticeship, which is an absolutely fantastic opportunity. If anyone ever has the opportunity to start an apprenticeship, I could not speak more highly of them. And I worked through my apprenticeship in Hatton Garden, which is London's jewellery quarter. And I remained there after my 7-year apprenticeship. I remained there for a further 7 years. So I spent 14 years for that company. And I maybe still would have been there to this day had it not been for the wonderful Great Depression that was in 2007, 2008, which was a horrific worldwide recession. And it cost us our job. It hit the luxury goods trade quite hard in London. And I started up my own company, which I'd never planned on doing. I just had to earn an income. And I started it up from my garden shed. And officially established it in 2009, 2010. And I've been running that now for 14 years. And it was just under 7 years ago that the producers of the BBC show The Repair Shop found me through my website as I portrayed my love for restoring and repairing pieces as well as making. And that really is where it took me till today. And I still am very actively involved in running my company, which is RTFJ. We're a bespoke jewellery company, also specialise in restoration. And we're branching out now into other forms of fashion jewellery, memorial jewellery, and the like.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and years and years of hard work to kind of get the title that you have. You have to be proud of it for sure. You know, of all the different crafts, what is it that kind of attracted you to gold and working with jewelry? What was that initial thing that drew you to it?
So it was the love of the crystals and the gemstones when I was a child. I was like a bit of a magpie to them, and obviously just originally started off. My parents tell me from about the age of 5, and I used to collect like pebbles and sort of shiny stones. And as I got older, it developed onto crystals. And from the metalwork side, on my father's side, it's 3 generations of metalsmiths. So my father was a coppersmith. So that coppersmithing though you don't really see it quite so much now, but it was the art of making like brewing vessels or anything out of sheet copper. So he taught me basic sheet metal work from an early age. So by the time I was 10, I was quite competently making pieces of metal and gas soldering. So it was the combination of those 2 loves, and also we did know someone within the family, or an extended friend of the family, who did the same job as me, which was a goldsmith. And he introduced me to the right people in order to get into the trade. And once you have come out of your apprenticeship, and once you have passed your skill on to another apprentice, and I have already completed 1 apprenticeship, and I've got another apprentice currently, then you can gain the title of a master goldsmith, because you have passed your trade on to another apprentice.
Really interesting. I did not know that, but yeah, really good to know, and great to see that you're supporting apprenticeships as well in creative industries. That's really great. Thank you for the introduction. Definitely. Hopefully we'll hear from you in a few minutes. Sonnaz has arrived back, so we're going to bring Sonnaz back on, and she's going to finish telling us about her career journey.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Charlie. Get to right cut off.
These things happen. Don't worry. So yeah, if you'd like to carry on about your career journey, you said "but" and then you cut off, so it was a very intense moment.
Climax. So just to recap, I'm not sure where I cut off. So I was very creative as a child, very dyslexic as I was getting into sort of between the age of 7 to sort of 11. It wasn't really picked up, but I was always drawing, and I was always wanting to make something physically with my hands. And then I started to use my mum's sewing machine as a sort of early 12 to 13-year-old, and it sort of started to click how much I was enjoying that side of life, actually. And then I was really being pushed to go down the academic route, but I rebelled against it. And instead of doing the law and sociology and all that kind of stuff that my parents wanted me to do, I actually studied the art subjects, textiles and creative subjects. But I still really struggled at college and 6th form with the written side of things. So I ended up dropping out of college after the first year, because I found an opportunity for an apprenticeship. I knew that I wanted to work, and I just wanted to get out there and start doing a job, instead of being in sort of education, which I was really struggling with. And I thought that the only way out for me is through an apprenticeship. And I looked for all different types of apprenticeships, but the description of the upholstery apprenticeship was that it was interiors and fabrics and sculpting. You know, I really wanted to get into art before I knew what job I wanted to do, and upholstery feels a bit like art. And so I dropped out of college at 17 and started the apprenticeship I was a year older than everybody else, because normally you start an apprenticeship at age 16. And the moment I stepped into that workshop, I knew that that was where I wanted to be. And I knew that it really kind of felt right to be making stuff with my hands. And then I served a 4-year apprenticeship with a company called Sunseeker Yachts in Poole in Dorset. And I worked for them for another 4 years. So I was there for about 8-ish years in total. And then I left to start my own business, and the rest is history.
Yes, certainly. Thank you for answering that one. You answered within that my follow-up question, which would be what drew you to upholstery, but you literally just said. So yeah, thank you. We're gonna bring on Iain, the final panelist member, and then we'll open back up. So see you very shortly, and everybody welcome Iain. Hello, how are you doing? Oh, sorry, 1 second. We're just having a small issue. Iain can't hear us. So let's just see what we can do. Just 1 second. Oh dear, oh dear. Sorry about this. It seems like the sound has gone on Iain's side and he can't currently hear us, which makes it quite difficult to answer questions when you can't hear what those questions are. While Iain tries to solve this problem, if you just give us about 20 seconds, we'll bring on Richard and Sonnaz to start answering the panel questions while we try and fix this in the background. All right, everyone. While we wait for Iain to try and sort that out, let's bring on. Seems like it is, and there's not much we can do about it. Can you hear us, or have we still gone?
I can. Now I can. I don't know what happened there.
Brilliant.
No problem. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your career journey now that you can hear us?
Sure. Sorry about that. Well, unlike these others who deal with real things, I only really deal with words. And what that meant for me was that at school, I was most interested in English as a subject, history as well, and anything to do with words, I suppose. And so I did plays and things at school, but I wasn't really an actor. I haven't got the face for it. And so I just sort of I ended up going to university, and I did an English degree at university. And an English degree feels like a useless thing. It's a scary thing for that reason, because it's like, where does this actually lead? It doesn't lead anywhere specific. But you do spend a lot of time reading books and reading plays and reading poetry, and actually, so you kind of develop your interests in storytelling through that experience. And then I think what happened to me was I came out of university with this English degree, and I didn't really know how to apply it. So I worked as a teacher, as an English teacher. I worked on a magazine. I worked in finance for 2 years, which is completely disastrous because I can't add up. And then I worked in advertising on and off. But all the time I was trying to write something, but I couldn't really understand what it was. I tried to write a novel. It was very bad. I wrote some plays. They were okay, but they weren't great. And it took me quite a long time to realize that the only real skill I had was for dialogue and for screenwriting. And it took me quite a long time to realize that everything you see on TV is written, you know, and everything you see in the cinema is written. And so, not everything. If you watch The Repair Shop, it's all kind of beautifully ad-libbed, I'm sure. But in my world, when the actor speaks, somebody wrote it, and that person is me.
Very, very interesting. And I'm sure we're going to get questions on screenwriting because it's such a good skill and very different to other types of writing that will come in a little bit later. So definitely excited to find out more from you, Iain, after. You know, you did mention a little bit why you found screenwriting. But yeah, what's the one thing about it that you love?
In a novel, when you're writing a novel, you have to create the whole world. You have to be a genius like J.K. Rowling, who, you know, creates an entire world and has to get inside the heads of the characters and describe the situation and create the buildings and create everything out of their head. In when you're writing for the screen, the camera does a lot of that work for you. So you don't have to explain who everybody is. You just create a story out of what they do and what they say, and I find that simplification to be a fruitful way of telling stories. And I also just love watching a great TV show or a great film. For me, that's almost the most fun, which is perhaps a bit tragic to say, the most fun you can have. And so I have pursued something that I enjoy, and I do think there is a great virtue in that in your life, because you've only got one of these lives, so you might as well do something that you care about.
Definitely. All right, I'm going to bring everybody questions. So our first question that's a part of our panel is obviously creative careers is such a vast industry, and there's so many, it can be quite difficult to figure out how or what you like that's creative. So what advice would you give to someone who is struggling to find a hobby in a creative subject and they don't really know what they enjoy that's creative? How might someone go about figuring out, you know, what they enjoy?
Who wants to go first?
You go first on this.
Okay. The thing that perhaps springs to mind initially is by literally talking to people who are maybe in these kind of areas that you're thinking about exploring. So I've had emails from young people asking questions and I've tried to respond, but certainly when I was younger, kind of talking to people who were working was really helpful for me. And I would sort of offer to sweep the floors and make cups of teas for not just the creative and somebody in a creative business, but a more sort of, even in retail, I had a friend who owned a shop and I thought maybe retail is for me. And I just needed to spend some time trying all these different things to see what I actually really liked and kind of loved as well, like what Iain said. So if I would encourage anybody to send an email or try and call and have a 5-minute, 10-minute chat with somebody where they're kind of curious about, and that could be helpful. And if you offer to sweep somebody's floor or make them tea, I'm sure you're not going to be turned down.
Definitely. Anybody else like to add anything?
I think Sonnaz just hit the nail on the head, particularly on that one. My only advice is, do not ever be afraid to explore an opportunity, because the very, very worst thing that can happen if you explore an opportunity is that opportunity doesn't become for you. I had other opportunities before I went down the lines of jewellery, and my gut feeling, although I was kind of being pushed towards it in my head, I knew my heart wasn't within it. So going with your heart as to what you really like. And as Sonnaz just said there, be prepared. Unfortunately, in this world now, nothing comes immediately. There's no immediate gratification to get to where you want to be. Don't immediately feel you've got to find a job that pays you the maximum amount per hour, because when you find those jobs that pay you the maximum amount per hour, they're bound to be a job that will only pay you that for the rest of your life. Be prepared to work for the minimum. Be prepared to put time and effort in. And if you put your time and effort in, and you will find your vocation. You will, absolutely. You might not think it's going to be, but not everyone ends up in the job that they feel they would like to be in. A lot of stuff's landed by accident.
I totally agree. I think that's both really good advice. If you do something that you dislike, you're still learning something. You're learning that you don't want to do this, and that is that's a big win for you, because you can chalk that off, and so you're narrowing down on your target. The only other thing I'd say is, because I would say this, the great German film director Werner Herzog is often asked, "How do I become a film director?" And he says, "Read books." That's all he says, because how else can you can have the experience that you have, but how can you massively increase the your ability to experience things and to learn about things? And books are the most astonishing technology for that, because you can either read something instructional or something inspirational, but you can go to places that you can't actually get to, by car or bus, and you can meet people that you couldn't possibly meet, and you'll just learn, so ABW, ABR, always be reading.
Yeah, love that advice. You can't go wrong with reading. You'll always learn something. And I like the idea that, you do have to try and find what your passion is, and you have to have a go at lots of different industries, which kind of leads me on to my next question, which is, say a young person has found the creative subject, whether that's drawing, painting, sculpting, making jewelry or rugs. I know that's quite a big thing currently, or candle making. How do you balance your kind of life choices to help guide you in pursuing your passion, but also making sure that you are making like financially stable decisions as you kind of leave education?
Might I take that one? This, in my opinion, is why a lot of the times, for myself as an apprentice, it's important to do it quite early on, when I hope I'd be right in saying that everyone listening is being supported in their life, living at home with parents or guardians, whereby you haven't got expenses for living. That is the time to explore your dream. If you leave it another 10 years and where you've got to pay rent, you've got to, you're not going to find the opportunities, because all of the opportunities that you are going to find that it's going to be worthwhile are initially going to be on low pay. That's not going to be across the board. There are going to be exceptions, of course, but apprenticeship pay is low, and if you are a working apprentice, you will not be able to afford to rent a house, have a car, have a family. It is really, really important to seize that opportunity as young as you can, so that financial burden is not encouraging you to go out there and take just the job that pays the money. Because, as I mentioned before, from my experience, the job that pays, when I was doing my apprenticeship, I had friends of mine that were earning triple what I earned working at McDonald's, with no disrespect to the fast food chain, but that's, and that's where they set their goals. They're like, oh, well, I don't know why you're working for £2 an hour, because I'm earning this, but it never got anywhere. You've got to invest the time when you're young in order to reap the benefits when you're old.
Solid advice. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Sonnaz?
Well, only that, yes, I started my apprenticeship at 17, so I was a bit older, and I moved from Southampton to Dorset, so from Hampshire to Dorset, and same as Richard, I think I was on £2.75 an hour or something. But the way I did it was actually found some sort of supported living accommodation. And so I could afford to, and I got the bus, so I didn't have a car then. And that's kind of how I did it. And actually, if you can just push through that first year, every year you then get paid a little bit more and a little bit more. And the driver is that, within that amount of time of your life is going to pass anyway. So put the time into something that, put that time into something that you're going to have a career that hopefully you'll love, or it will, even if you don't end up in that particular career, you would have gained some skills and it's not wasted, a bit echoing what Iain said. So the financial bit is not necessarily the focus initially. You're actually investing you're investing the time in yourself, and that is the really, I would encourage people to focus on that.
In writing, I'd agree with all that. Writing is a little different in that you can do it wherever you are. You can do it in a coffee shop. You can do it, on a bus. You can do it. And so you sort of have to get into the habit of just doing it around the rest of your life. And you do probably, I completely agree with Richard that when you're young, you've got the opportunity to take a chance on things and just pursue things that you care about because you haven't got huge expenditure. You might not have kids that you got to pay for, whatever else. But I think, but with writing, it can be a bit more complicated because it's difficult you've got to get a body of work together to show somebody what you can do. And during that phase, you may well have to be doing something else. I worked in advertising, I worked in these various other things. And I think most writers do something else while they're writing. In the early part of their career, J.K. Rowling, had a regular job while she was writing Harry Potter, and I think that's very often the case. So you have to sometimes, but what that does is it does test you. It says to you, look, do you really care about this? Do you really think you've got something here? Do you really want to pursue it? Because perseverance is one of the major tests for people who want to get into these things. Lots of people say, oh, I'd like to do that. And then, 6 months goes by and it hasn't happened and they do something else. Well, which is absolutely fine. But if you're not in it, you can't win it. And so perseverance is one of is the main test of if you're interested in becoming a writer, I would say.
I like that you mentioned sort of developing that perseverance, and you've all talked about kind of pushing through and accepting that things are going to be a little bit tough when you're younger, so you can reap the benefits when you're a little bit older. What sort of skills would a young person need to develop in addition to that sort of perseverance in order to go into a creative industry? It can be quite a difficult one to break into or feel like this is my moment. So what do they need to be aware of, and what do they need to be focusing on developing outside of the actual skills of their craft to help them succeed? Thinking.
Me?
Sure.
Well, I mean, in film and TV, there's a bunch of different careers. So have a look at all of those different things that you can do inside there, from design and production design to costume design to to actually operating a camera, or being a director of photography, to being an editor. Some of these slightly more less well-known tasks in the TV world are really interesting crafts. So there's so many different ones that if you're interested in the world, it's probably quite a good idea to just try to, when the credits run at the end of a TV show, just look at what all of those titles are, and then just do a bit of Googling and work that sort of thing out. And that can draw you into many different directions. I think your question's about, it's about the craft. I mean, for me, it's all about your craft, choosing your craft, and then sort of pursuing it. So when I became interested in writing screenplays, I tried to get my hands on as many as I could. And before the internet, this was actually quite difficult. But you could find, I was once in America, and on the street corner, somebody was selling screenplays. And so I was buying the screenplays and reading them because I was fascinated by that thing. So I think if you the more you research and invest in your own craft is the key thing, really. But to decide what your craft is first, look around and see what all the various jobs and roles are, I guess.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything to that one?
I think there's a little bit of a reflection just on what's previously been said there. If people have got many different ideas as to where they want to pursue their career, do not be afraid to ask someone older than you in that career, because everyone who is passionate about their job or their industry, even if they can't physically help you. So if someone came to me right now and said, look, I really want a job in jewellery. Sadly, my workshop doesn't allow any more people working here, but I would have the contacts of people to put them. And anyone in industry, anyone would spare the time, even if it's just 10 seconds, to give you a little bit of advice where you go, do not be afraid to pick up the phone or drop an email and ask people a question, because the very worst you're going to do is not get an answer. But if you are a young person and an email came into my inbox, someone saying, look, I really, really want to do what you do, where do I start? You are not going to be ignored. You are not going to be ignored. Someone will give you a bit of advice, even if it is the tiniest smidgen of advice. It's more advice than you would have had you have not asked, and you may just be able to focus off in that direction.
Yeah, the last thing I would sort of say is some of the skills that I found were quite useful early on. One, building on what the guys have said, one was planning my time, and planning getting to work on time. Like I didn't have a car, so I would get the bus. So I know this is I understood the question totally different. So I would have to plan my day to get there, to not be late. And actually I was always 45 minutes early. But also, as well as planning, which is a skill that will echo throughout your life, it's developing a curiosity, which is kind of what Iain was saying, and an inquiring mind, and an inquiring kind of wanting to know more about either what you're thinking about going into or pursuing, or the shoot off options of careers around that. So it's being curious all the time, asking questions all the time, but also being able to plan your time as a young person, whether it's, like Iain said, like writing in your spare time, or having to get to your apprenticeship, or if you've organized to meet somebody for like a work experience or some questioning, getting there on time. All those kind of put you in good stead, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Planning can be such a crucial part of anyone, whether you're in the creative careers or not. I think it's definitely a skill that everyone should be focusing on. We're going to move on to our student Q&A and ask some questions that have come in. The first one is an anonymous question, and it's is working in creative careers kind of lonely, or do you find yourself working with others often?
Well, I mean, in TV and film, it's very collaborative. It starts lonely because you have to sit down in your office or in your bedroom and write something down that you think is going to be a great story, and you are the guardian of that to start with, and you put work into it completely by yourself. But you might, it's always worth talking to other people and saying, this is what I'm trying to do. and pitching your idea to someone just to see their reaction. Oh, that's a good story. I don't get it. And so if you try it out on your friends, it's not a bad way to mitigate the loneliness of the task, which is sitting there by a word processor, by a computer, putting one word after another. Once you've done that and you start getting it out into the world, you have to engage with a lot of other people. I have to go and pitch to a producer and tell the producer, I think this is going to be an amazing TV show. Let's do it. So I've got to persuade someone. Then the producer comes on board and we've got to go into Netflix or the BBC and persuade them that it's a good idea. Then they say, yes, it's a good idea. Right now it's incredibly collaborative because we need, a set designer, we need a casting agent, we need actors, we need and everything like that. So in writing, it starts lonely. It becomes, in screenwriting, it becomes collaborative. But I'd always say, talk to people about it because that's great practice for explaining what you're about and what you're trying to do. So always be talking to your friends and telling them what you're trying to do and make it less lonely for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really, really kind of key. And definitely, I think it comes back to your kind of perseverance point that you were saying about keeping going, even when it's lonely, so it gets collaborative if that's what you thrive on. Anyone else want to add anything to that one?
I went from an apprenticeship in a business that had 2,500 people to, working on my own in a workshop to begin with before, I had colleagues. But even working alone, I did find that shift quite difficult because I was just used to saying good morning to people and walking into my own workshop and it's just me and the radio. But there were still clients that I'd have to speak to. There were the other businesses around me that I had to speak to. And although it's nice to work in a team, I actually quite like working on my own. So it could be something that potentially could put you off of a career prospect. But what I have found now is I can be as social or as insular as I like. And I really like having that flexibility.
Definitely. Anything to add, Richard, or shall I ask our next question?
Well, yeah, just to follow on, it's from a loneliness perspective, I wouldn't say learning any career would be lonely because you would have a mentor teaching you. If you're going into any job, you've got to learn how to do that, and there will be someone by your side, and you often be in a big environment. But I also would urge anyone not to be afraid of loneliness in work, because some of my most creative ideas have all occurred on my own. And I'm not suggesting do not spend the evenings socializing with friends, but certainly dedicating at least one day a week to sit there on your own and process your thoughts about what you really want from life could be absolutely nothing but beneficial.
That's a really interesting point about developing thoughts on your own and things like that. Is that what you guys do? Is that kind of a universal thing?
Always. Yeah. Best creative thinking time. I actually one day a week I work until midnight. And the reason why I work until midnight is because I'm on I have my dog with me. But it's such a wonderful time. The phone stops ringing at 6, the door stops going at 6, and I get 6 creative hours. And often I create far more, because I'm still at the bench making. I run the business as well during the day. I create far more production in that 6 hours till midnight, because you get a second wind and you're on your own and the radio's on and maybe listening to a podcast or something, and it's just personal time. And if you try and be creative in the day when the phone's ringing and emails are going, you can't, because you get a distracted train of thought. So being on my own is when I come back with one of my very best ideas.
Completely agree. I think for me, it's the early morning. The kids probably won't want to hear that, but I like the early morning, and I also like cycling, going for a bike ride. Most good creative ideas in writing spring from the subconscious, and you learn to train to give yourself space to allow them to arrive. And for me, that's going out on a bike and just spending 2 hours on a bike, you come back, you can think, oh, that's not a bad idea, and then you can start writing it. So you just got to find your way to allow yourself to access your well springs of creativity, and it'll be very personal to you, I guess.
I actually think there's some science in that, Iain. Isn't it like you distract your doing part of your brain, so you allow your creative side to kind of flourish while exercising and things like that? So I think there might be some real good logic behind that one. We'll move on to our next question then, that's coming from South Hampshire College Group, and they've asked for each of you, what's the favourite aspect of your job?
Mine is well, there's quite a few actually. It's just sprung into my mind all in one go. But I would say, it might sound cliche, but the creativity of it. Creativity for me means ultimate freedom. And I can design or make in a way that I want to or see fit. And to, that, yeah, so it's the creativity. It's not necessarily, the paperwork side of things, although that is a necessary evil. It's the creativity, and also it's the translating what somebody wants into a physical thing. That for me is a wild ride, because something in your head then becomes physical in the real world, and that is I find that's like magic. That's what I love about it.
Love it. I'm not a craft person, because whenever I try to imagine something in my head, it's never quite right when I put it on paper. So
That's all right.
Sometimes imagining in your head is the only way you can do it. It's something I struggle with a lot. Is people, bespoke jewelers, people come to me with a concept, and a lot of people say, "Can you draw me a picture of what that looks like?" And I have to say, "No, I cannot draw. I cannot draw for toffees. Honestly, it's terrible. I can do a rough sketch, but it's bad. But I can create it with my hands. So don't necessarily just think that just because you can't do one thing, you can't do another." But for me, the passion that I get behind my job is, I'm most lucky that in almost all circumstances that someone wishes to commission a piece of jewellery, it's going to have a positive story attached to it: an engagement, a wedding, a celebration, or a birthday. The only exception to that is my memorial jewellery range. But even then, it is also a happy time when I'm making it, because we're providing someone with an opportunity to remember a deceased person through jewellery. So there's always a positive vibe to the creativity that I'm lucky enough to do every day.
I think the question is, what do you like best? I like coming up with an idea. I find that very enjoyable, and because it's perfect at that point. It's going to have to go through so many processes, and by the end it'll be something slightly different. You're always trying to make the thing at the end sort of match the beauty and the perfection of the idea that you had at the top. But that first moment is always very thrilling, I think. There's many processes in the filmmaking thing, and for me, scripting is quite agonizing. It's sort of slow, and everyone will give you a note, and you've just got to keep iterating and iterating. Filming itself is enormously boring, and as the writer, you feel like a bit of an idiot. What am I doing here? And then, but the edit is actually the fun time, when the whole thing comes together and you get to try things in different ways. And again, it becomes a bit more playful and loose. So I'd probably say coming up with the idea and then actually editing.
Definitely sounds fun. I love how different they all are as well. We're heading towards the end of our time, so our final question then comes from Kent Virtual School, and they've asked, what subjects would you recommend studying at school or college? And I think this comes from the idea that obviously creative subjects are quite limited. So what might you suggest that they can do while they're in school to study?
I mean, for me, I don't know what it's called now, but it was CDT, which was craft design technology, and I'm pretty sure there must be an equivalent now. I'm going back 30 years, but that the opportunity of creation, yes, just that's the and I loved languages. It had nothing to do with my career, but that was my passion at school, was languages.
Yeah, nice. They definitely do have something that I think it's called design and technology now. It might have changed.
They dropped the C.
Yeah, I think they dropped the C, but it's still very similar. I think you look at woodworking and all sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else? Any other subjects that you think are key or helpful if you want to go into a creative industry?
Well, I'm obviously gonna say English. For me, the queen of subjects, because it's everything. It studies all human experience. You can literally, you can read a book about an upholsterer in Tehran, or you can read about a goldsmith in ancient Egypt, or you can read a book about, or a script or a play about a screenwriter in Dorset. And so you can go anywhere and do anything, and it can take you to different places. So I'm also married to an English teacher, so I'm biased.
I love it. Any ideas from you, sir?
Yes, I would say perhaps choose one creative subject, and then controversially perhaps, whether that be art or textiles or design and technology, then I would say just study what you might find interesting at the time. To get an apprenticeship, certainly when I was applying, you just needed a C in English, maths and science. And I don't think you even need that now. And I sort of came from a lot of pressure from my family to do and be and get and academic. And the best advice I received actually was, don't even worry, just do what you think you're going to be interested in and enjoy. But to kind of structure that in a helpful way, I would suggest, yes, choose a creative subject, as in arty subject or textile, and then take the pressure off and choose some fabric. That's where my head is. Choose some subjects that you think you're just going to enjoy, or that you might want to learn more about, and take the pressure off. Because if you're creative, it will always come later anyway.
Definitely a nice note to look at wrapping our sessions off. So I'm going to ask each of you a final sort of question, and then we'll say goodbye to you. So we'll start with you, Richard. Do you have any final thoughts or a key piece of advice that you'd like to leave our young people with today?
Yeah, I think I'll reiterate on what I said earlier. Just don't be afraid to pursue a dream. Don't listen to anyone telling you shouldn't do something, unless it's illegal, of course. And just pursue. Start early. Get your thoughts in process. If you're 12, 13, start thinking now about what you want to do, because those next 3 years till you leave school are going to fly by. They really, really are. And it is an absolutely ideal time to really start pursuing your career when you're 16. Don't go to university unless your career path tells you to go to university. Don't just go to university for the crack. If that is not going to pursue your career path, get focused in on an apprenticeship and get your skills unleashed.
Thank you, Richard. It's been lovely having you on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Next up then, Iain, would you like to give a final thoughts for today?
Just read and write. Read and write. It doesn't matter what it is, but always be reading, always be writing. And if you're interested specifically in screen writing, you can now get any screenplay from anything. You can find it online, which is an astonishing resource. So if you've seen a show or a film or a movie that you like, get the screenplay and read it, and then you can see how what was on the page ended up on what was on the screen. And that is just, you'll be teaching yourself, you'll be an autodidact, and that is the best thing you can be.
Thank you for your final key piece of advice. I love it. And thank you for giving your time out today, for joining us. It's been great having you. Last but not least, then, Sonnaz, would you like to give us a key piece of advice as we say goodbye?
I would say to stay curious and explore different avenues and options for yourself, because it might be the least likely one that might actually resonate and spark interest with you. Had you had said upholstery was a career, I wouldn't have known anything about it at all. But my curiosity in apprenticeships led me to finding an upholstery apprenticeship. So stay curious and keep an inquisitive mind about you. And of course, work hard. Hard work does pay off.
Definitely. I think you'll find all our panelists are extremely hard workers and have put the time in, haven't you, to get where you are today?
Yeah, and just to, to round off on that, it sounds really arduous to say I work hard, but if you find something that you are passionate about, the working hard bit and putting the hours in won't be an effort all the time. You'll get those things, you'll get those areas of it that will energize you and spur you on. It will be hard at times, but the passion, and you'll have moments where it energizes you again. That's what pushes you on. So look out for those indicators.
Thank you for joining us. It's been lovely having you on.
Thank you for having me.